We have just passed the milestone of the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote in both the United Kingdom and the United States. What better time to take a look at the state of women's rights in both countries? 5 women in the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program and myself at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania traveled to England and interviewed 15 women from Preston in the north and from London in the south. We also interviewed 15 women in the Mid-Atlantic region about their views on the women's rights movement. Please join us as we all explore women's rights, feminism, women's self-empowerment, and the state of women's rights in both countries. In 2019, National Geographic Society interviewed 1,000 women. They found that 29% used the term feminist to define themselves. The term has been used by some individuals, but today it's not used by most women. Let's take a look at the women that we interviewed and look at their feelings about the word feminist.
Feminism is about believing that women are equal to men, have equal rights as men, have just as much status, worth, value, and I've always believed that.
So I do identify as a feminist because I believe in gender equality. I also kind of feel that women were always oppressed, and it kind of sparked in me to feel, the strength to actually be someone as a woman. And it's the stereotypes that you meet every day that actually reinforce the feminist within me, basically.
I think I identify as a feminist because there's still a whole lot that needs to be done. And I was born in I was raised in a conservative family, so I kind of was able to grow up and realize what I was being made to do rather than what my brother wasn't being made to do. I saw the injustice in that, and then I found stories that other women were being treated that way, and it kind of just spiraled from there.
And so, with my dad, with my grandfathers, with my coworkers, since this election, that's been the next push into my activism is, I'm not so involved in a group, but I am speaking up more to the men in my life that I love about my experience. And I think that that's really important as a feminist.
After grappling with the term feminist, most of the interviewees next went into detail about what issues face feminists today. And no matter if they were from the United Kingdom or the United States, we found 3 patterns, looking at gender equality, looking at the wage gap, and looking at choices revolving around their body and their choice. When we look at the responses from those that were interviewed, insofar as their attitudes about gender roles, we find that only millennial women reported, whether they're in the UK or the US, reported that they felt that their gender role expectations were much different than their male counterparts. Our research results showed that the women that were interviewed of the second wave, those that are in their 70s, spent much of their interview time talking about gender roles specifically and how they've witnessed a change during their lifetime. How they found that occupations were limited to them, wages were limited to them, but it was those that are in the third wave, those that are in their 50s, 40s, and 30s, who reported watching their mothers being limited in the roles that were assigned to them based on gender, but having the ability themselves to pursue many occupations and have different roles in the household.
My father always would say things like, obviously, don't underestimate yourself. You can do so many things. I remember my sister and my mother having an argument about her just being a teacher, or me just being a social worker. So, I had to sort of really pay attention to my ambition and try to, be ambitious around that.
Oh no, like I had to do it all the time. Like all the aunts would be in the kitchen while like creating the food while the guys would go sit and like watch the football game. And I was like, I like football. Like I want to go watch it. Why am I stuck in the kitchen?
Boys, this everyday stereotypes like, oh, you belong to the kitchen, you don't know history, you shouldn't go to politics because you're a woman, you're too emotional to do that. And it just reinforced the idea about feminism and about why feminism is important, why should I be feminist.
Will hear me say over and over, I'm not a maid, I'm your mother, so you don't need a mother for that, go take care of that yourself. And that's like kind of how we try to enact feminism in our own house, which is like, you can learn how to do laundry and cook, thank you very much. You will clean the bathroom. You will learn how to clean the bathroom, my 7 and 9-year-old white boys. Yes, you will. So, and my husband really is good with that. Like, he's pretty good with that. But, in the beginning, I was the one who was there. I was there more often. So, and it was sort of just assumed that I would work less. So I'm sort of really excited about him not working and me working more, because it makes me feel like, okay, like in the course of a marriage, things can sort of equal out over time. So
during the beginning of the marriage, I thought this was wonderful. I had somebody to cook for, and my husband would come in and he'd put his feet up and he would read the paper and I would be busy in the kitchen and I would look after our lovely flat. When my first baby came, I suddenly realized that I was doing absolutely everything.
And then when I became a mother, that was another time when it felt like a push into feminism more. I had a pregnancy loss, and I remember when that happened being like very angry that my lovely doctor, my lovely male doctor, couldn't give me any reason why I was having a pregnancy loss. Like there was no reason for it. And I remember thinking very clearly, like the healthcare system is really biased. Like if this was happening to men, there'd be more of a reason. There would be more research into it, and he couldn't even give me research around it. So I remember feeling very clearly when I became a mother that, hold up, like this system is really rigged against women, the medical system, the healthcare system.
The expectation was you could be a secretary, which is what my parents wanted me to be, then I'd meet a nice businessman, a nurse or a social worker, which is what I actually was. And now young women can be anything. They can be business people, they can be lawyers, they can be doctors. There's a huge difference.
Women in their 20s in both the United States and the United Kingdom saw the wage gap as a huge problem for women. The women that we interviewed in their 70s, whether they were in the United Kingdom or the United States, spoke about working and a pride in entering male-dominated professions. However, they also spoke about the difference in how hard they worked versus men in the same job and how little pay they got for the same exact work.
I think there's a lot of things that the women around me can bond together with, and I think feminism is one of them, because even if you don't like calling yourself a feminism, you can't be a self-respecting woman and be like, well, women don't deserve to be paid any more. They don't deserve to be paid equally to men, because that just sounds ridiculous. Like, why shouldn't we get paid equally to men,
Really sad now to see young women still having to fight about equal pay. Okay, they got their jobs in the BBC, that's our media service, but then we discover that there's a massive pay gap between men and women.
It's 2019 and still we struggle, and still there is like 21% pay gap, which is awful.
In the United Kingdom, the women that were interviewed spoke about the importance of marching not just for women's rights and women's right to equal pay, but also marching and protesting for workers' rights. They talked about how many of the women that were leaders in the women's movement were also leaders in the workers' movement. Having autonomy over one's body is another issue that came up again and again in the interviews. The topic of the right to an abortion and the attacks most recently on the right of personal choice being legislated by different states in the United States, being challenged at the Supreme Court level at the United States, is also an important issue in the United Kingdom at this time. In the first few months of 2019, Nearly 30 states in the United States introduced some form of an abortion ban in their legislation. 15 states have specifically been working with so-called heartbeat bills that would ban abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Abortion legislation in Northern Ireland was mentioned as a major issue amongst those that were interviewed from the United Kingdom.
I mean, as I think I said, we went on marches for women's right to choose, because that was another area. The whole abortion campaign was a massive amount of activity, and one of the things we set up in our community centre were pregnancy testing and counselling and helping women to make a choice about what they wanted to do in their situation, rather than being forced into things that they didn't want to choose.
Women band together to try to keep the rights to their body. So with abortions, or just being able to have a say in what they can do with their body. I think that is a huge thing that I've been witnessing, especially nowadays where they're trying to take away those rights. And a lot of people are banding together and being hey, this is a woman's body, and if she wants to do whatever she wants to do, then who are you to tell her no?
The last issue that we took a look at was, are we in a new wave of feminism? Is there a fourth wave? I know it's debatable in the academic communities if there's waves at all. We found that all the interviewees talked about that we were in a new era. Whether it was a wave or not, they didn't know. Those that were interviewed in their 20s were very consistent with the research. They talked about this new wave or new era of feminism, emphasizing sexual harassment, body shaming, and rape culture.
Not listening to people who are different from you, not listening to other marginalized, but telling them, right? And I don't think I was doing that so much, but I definitely wasn't listening to people of color as much as I could have previous, and other marginalized populations like the LGBT community. So that has been something that's been a bit of an awakening too since being at the Women's March. It's just listening more. So I will read more, I'm following more people on social media that are women of color particularly, and just listening to their perspectives.
But to me, intersectionality is, I understand you're different from me. We are not the same. You may be gay, I may be bi, somebody else may be something else, identify as something else, or I'm a black woman, she's a white woman, Muslim, my Muslim sisters, everything. It's understanding those differences and coming with them. I still accept that you're different from me. I understand I could probably never relate to the type of things that you've been through. But at the same time, I need that power. We need to put our power and our differences together to create this big bowl of acceptance so all of us feel like we belong.
The fourth wave is centered in the concept of intersectionality, that all cultures should be not only appreciated, but those who live in the margins of multiple cultures, their voices should be raised up. There was an acknowledgement that in the fourth wave, that folks of color specifically have been subordinate to white feminists in the second and third wave movements. However, the interviews showed that the second wave feminists that we interviewed both in the United Kingdom and the United States talk about the intersectional nature of marches, women's marches, environmental marches, workers' rights marches, and how many different groups of people participated, were represented, but were not necessarily in the top leadership. We also have to acknowledge in this study that there are only 30 people interviewed. While it's a very deep sample of both United States and United Kingdom feminists, at the same time, this information that we share cannot be generalizable to a much larger population. So, of course, we take what we have learned and we need to build upon that. It was our hope that this look at feminism at this time, after the 100th anniversary of suffrage, both in the United States and the United Kingdom, would give us a snapshot. What does feminism look like today? If most people in these countries are not defining themselves as feminist, is there indeed a feminist movement? And if there is, how many people are actually participating? And is it significant? It certainly seems significant. At the Women's March around the world, we saw women holding up signs and yelling for their freedom of choice, of wage gap, of gender roles, and the ability to be fully actualized today, tomorrow, and forever.